The glass door explodes open with a violent crack, and there she is, in Jefferson, her dark hands stretched out in desperation as 8-month-old baby Michael tumbles through the air, 23 floors above the bustling streets of Manhattan. The wind howls like a living thing, and for one heart-stopping moment, gravity seems to pause. But what happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it that Tuesday afternoon. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, just 40 minutes earlier in the Stanton family's pristine Upper East Side penthouse. And Jefferson moves through the marble-floored apartment with the quiet efficiency of someone who's learned to make herself invisible. At 52, she's been cleaning for wealthy families for over 2 decades, but the Stantons are different, or so she thought when she started working for them 6 months ago. The morning sun streams through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the minimalist furniture that probably costs more than her annual salary. "And, could you please handle the laundry today? I've got 3 conference calls back-to-back," Emily Stanton calls out, barely looking up from her laptop. Emily's blonde hair is pulled into a perfect bun, her designer blazer crisp despite it being barely 9 in the morning. She sits at the dining table that could seat 12, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee cups. "Of course, Mrs. Stanton," and replies, her voice carrying the practiced politeness she's perfected over the years. She glances toward the nursery where baby Michael is sleeping peacefully in his custom-made crib, positioned near the large balcony doors that offer a breathtaking view of Central Park. But little did and know that those very doors would soon become the center of every parent's worst nightmare. John Stanton paces the living room, his phone pressed against his ear, his usually composed demeanor cracking under pressure. "I understand the deadline, but these numbers don't add up," he says into the phone, running his free hand through his dark hair. "We're talking about people's pensions here." And has worked for enough wealthy families to recognize the signs. Behind the marble countertops and designer furniture, the Stantons are struggling, not financially, perhaps, but in ways that money can't fix. She sees it in Emily's distracted glances, in John's tense shoulders, in the way they barely acknowledge their baby unless he's crying. As Anne sorts through Michael's tiny clothes, she notices the balcony door rattling slightly. The weather forecast had mentioned strong winds today, something about a storm system moving through the tri-state area. She makes a mental note to check the locks later. "This is ridiculous," John mutters, ending his call and tossing his phone onto the leather couch. 20 years of experience, and they're questioning every decision I make." Emily looks up from her laptop with tired eyes. "Maybe you should consider taking that position at the smaller firm. Less stress, better work-life balance. And less money," John snaps back. "Have you seen our monthly expenses? The mortgage alone is killing us, not to mention your medical bills." And pretends not to hear, but the word medical sends a chill down her spine. She's noticed Emily's frequent trips to what she assumes are doctor appointments, always returning looking worried and exhausted. The rattling from the balcony door grows louder, and Anne feels her first real wave of unease. The sound cuts through the tension-filled apartment like a warning. "I should check that door," Anne says, setting down the laundry basket. "Don't worry about it," Emily waves her off dismissively. "The building maintenance said all the doors are secure. Just some wind." But Anne's maternal instincts, honed from raising 3 children of her own, tell her otherwise. She approaches the nursery anyway, where Michael sleeps peacefully, completely unaware that the wind outside is growing stronger by the minute. The curtains near his crib flutter violently, and Anne notices something that makes her blood run cold: the safety latch on the balcony door isn't properly engaged. In fact, it's barely holding. "Mr. and Mrs. Stanton," she calls out, trying to keep the urgency from her voice. "I really think we should secure this door properly." But John is back on another heated phone call, and Emily has disappeared into her home office. And stands alone in the nursery, watching the door strain against its inadequate lock, listening to the wind that seems to be growing more aggressive by the moment. This decision would change everything. She reaches for the door handle, determined to fix the latch herself, when a massive gust of wind hits the building. The sound is like thunder, and every loose paper in the apartment takes flight. The door she's trying to secure suddenly flies open with tremendous force, and Anne stumbles backward. That's when she sees Michael's crib. It's on wheels, she realizes with horror, and the sudden rush of air is pushing it slowly but steadily toward the open balcony door. But the real shock was still coming, and Jefferson was about to become the only thing standing between baby Michael and a 23-story fall. Anne's hands trembled as she gripped the crib's edge, her knuckles white against the wood. The wind had died down momentarily, giving her just enough time to pull the baby's bed back from the balcony's threshold. Little Marcus gurgled happily, completely oblivious to how close he'd just come to disaster. "Thank God," she whispered, scooping the baby into her arms and pressing him close to her chest. But as she turned toward the living room, another fierce gust rattled the glass door so violently she thought it might shatter. The latch had broken completely now, leaving the door to swing wildly on its hinges. Anne struggled across the room, fighting against the wind that seemed determined to push her backward. Papers from John's desk swirled around her feet like a tornado, and she could hear picture frames rattling against the walls. With Marcus still in one arm, she managed to wedge a heavy bookend against the door's base, but she knew it was only a temporary fix. From the kitchen, she could hear John's voice rising in frustration during his phone call. "I understand the payment is overdue, but I need more time. These student loans are killing me." And with Emily's medical bills piling up, his voice cut off abruptly as he noticed and watching from the doorway. "Everything okay out there?" he asked, covering his phone's mouthpiece. "The balcony door's broken, Mr. Stanton." The wind nearly, and started to explain, but John had already turned back to his call. "Look, I'll have the money by Friday. I promise." He hung up and slumped against the kitchen counter, running his hands through his hair. And bounced Marcus gently, studying John's defeated expression. She'd been working for the Stantons for 8 months now, and she'd never seen him look so worn down. The designer suits couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes, or the way his shoulders sagged under invisible weight. But that's when everything changed. Emily burst through the front door like she was running from something, her usually perfect blonde hair disheveled and her designer purse clutched against her chest like armor. "John? John, where are you?" Her voice carried a note of panic that made Anne's stomach clench. "In here," John called back, immediately straightening up and forcing a smile. "How did the doctor's appointment go?" Emily froze when she saw Anne standing there with the baby. For a moment, something flickered across her face, fear, maybe, or guilt, before she composed herself. "Fine. Just routine stuff." She reached for Marcus, but her hands were shaking so badly that Anne hesitated before passing him over. You're pale as a ghost. What did Dr. Morrison say?" "I told you, it was nothing important." Emily's voice was too bright, too cheerful. She kissed Marcus's forehead, but Anne noticed how she avoided John's searching gaze. The wind chose that moment to slam against the balcony door again, and the bookend Anne had wedged there skittered across the floor. All three adults turned toward the sound, but it was Anne who moved first, rushing to secure the door once more. "We really need to get this fixed," she said, pressing her full weight against the glass. "It's dangerous with the baby." "We'll call someone tomorrow," John interrupted, but his tone suggested it was just another expense he couldn't afford. And watched Emily sink onto the white leather couch, still clutching Marcus like a lifeline. Something was definitely wrong. In all her months working here, she'd never seen Mrs. Stanton act so secretive, so frightened. The woman who usually commanded every room she entered now looked small and vulnerable. "Mrs. Stanton, are you sure you're feeling all right?" Anne asked gently. Emily's head snapped up, and for a split second, her carefully constructed mask slipped entirely. Anne saw raw terror in those blue eyes, the kind of fear that comes from devastating news delivered in sterile medical offices. "I'm fine, Anne. Thank you for asking." But Emily's voice cracked on the word fine, and she quickly looked away. John's phone rang again, cutting through the tension. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. "I have to take this." He stepped into his home office and closed the door, but not before and caught a glimpse of the caller ID, Davidson and Associates Legal. Emily must have seen it too, because she pressed her face against Marcus's soft hair and could have sworn she heard a muffled sob. The apartment fell eerily quiet except for the wind still whistling through the gap in the balcony door. And stood there, watching Emily struggle to maintain her composure while holding her baby, and felt her heart breaking for this family that seemed to be falling apart at the seams. But what happened next shocked everyone, including in herself. Emily's phone buzzes again, the third call in 5 minutes. And watches from the kitchen as Emily glances at John, who's still pacing by the window with his laptop balanced precariously in one hand. "I have to take this," Emily whispers, but her voice carries that same tension and noticed earlier. It's Dr. Morrison's office. John stops mid-pace. "Again?" "Emily, what's going on?" "I told you, it's just follow-up blood work." Emily's hand trembles slightly as she answers. "Hello?" "Yes, this is Emily Stanton." And pretends to focus on organizing the baby bottles, but every instinct tells her to listen. In her 15 years of caring for families, she's learned to read the signs when something's seriously wrong. "What do you mean the results are inconclusive?" Emily's voice drops to barely a whisper, but the apartment's open layout carries every word. "Dr. Morrison said we'd have answers today." The baby starts fussing in his crib, and then moves closer, gently rocking him while straining to hear. John has stopped pretending to work entirely now, his eyes fixed on his wife. "No, I understand. Tuesday? But that's 4 more days." Emily's free hand grips the edge of the kitchen counter until her knuckles turn white. "Fine. Yes, I'll be there at 9. She hangs up and stands frozen for a moment, staring at the phone like it might ring again with better news. John's voice is softer now, all his earlier frustration replaced with concern. "What did they say?" "They need to run more tests." Emily's words come out flat, emotionless. The initial blood work showed some irregularities. Anne's heart clenches. She's been through this before with other families, the careful medical language that means everything and nothing, the waiting that stretches like torture. "What kind of irregularities?" John sets his laptop down completely now, moving toward his wife. "I don't know. They wouldn't say over the phone." Emily finally looks up, and can see the fear she's been hiding. "John, what if?" "Don't." He cuts her off, pulling her into his arms. "Don't go down that road. Not until we know something concrete." But can see what John can't from where he's standing, Emily's medical folder's sitting on the counter, partially hidden under a stack of mail. The letterhead clearly reads Oncology Associates of Manhattan. The word hits in like a physical blow. Cancer. That explains the secret of doctor visits, the exhaustion Emily tries to hide, the way she's been holding the baby longer lately, as if memorizing every moment. "I should go," Emily says, pulling away from John. "The appointment moved up to this afternoon. Dr. Morrison wants to see me before they schedule the next round of tests." "I'm coming with you." "No." Emily's response is immediate, almost sharp. "You have that conference call with the board at 3. We can't afford for you to miss it, especially not now." The weight of those last 3 words hangs in the air. Not now, not when they might be facing medical bills on top of John's job uncertainty. Not now, not when everything feels like it's falling apart. And watches John's face cycle through anger, frustration, and helplessness. She knows that feeling, wanting to help but being trapped by circumstances beyond your control. "This is insane, Em. How am I supposed to concentrate on some stupid merger when you're dealing with this alone?" "Because we need that job." Emily's voice breaks slightly. "Because if these tests show what I think they might show, we're going to need the insurance. We're going to need everything." The baby starts crying harder now, sensing the tension in the room. And lifts him gently, bouncing him against her shoulder while her mind races. 3 hours ago, her biggest worry was a rattling glass door. Now she's watching a family potentially fall apart, and there's nothing she can do but witness their pain. Emily grabs her purse and heads for the door, pausing to kiss the baby's forehead. "I'll call you as soon as I know anything." Wait." John's voice stops her at the threshold. But before he can finish his thought, his phone rings. The distinctive tone he set for his boss makes everyone freeze. "I have to take this," he says, anguish clear in his voice. "Mr. Hendricks doesn't call unless." "Take it," Emily whispers. "I'll be fine." She's gone before John can protest, leaving him staring at his ringing phone like it's a loaded weapon. And rocks the baby, watching John's face transform as he answers. "Yes, sir." "What?" "No, that can't be right. The presentation isn't until tomorrow." And can't hear the other side of the conversation, but John's expression tells her everything. His face goes pale, then red with barely controlled panic. "Today?" "But sir, I haven't had time to prepare the Morrison projections, and..." Whatever his boss says next makes John sink into the nearest chair. What happened next shocked everyone, because John's response to that phone call would change everything they thought they knew about their fight for survival. The weight of John's words hung in the apartment like thick fog. And stood frozen in the doorway, her heart hammering as she watched him sink deeper into the leather chair, his head buried in his hands. The revelation about his job being at risk sent shockwaves through her that she hadn't expected to feel so intensely. 18 months, John whispered to himself, his voice cracking. 18 months of promises, and they're just going to let me go because some algorithm says I'm not profitable enough. Anne's maternal instincts kicked in, but not just for little Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib. She felt an overwhelming urge to comfort this broken man who'd been carrying such a heavy burden while trying to provide for his family. The wind outside seemed to echo his despair, rattling the windows with renewed force. That's when Emily's key turned in the lock. And quickly retreated to the kitchen, not wanting to intrude, but she could hear everything from where she stood. Emily's footsteps were different today, slower, more deliberate, as if each step carried enormous weight. "John?" Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." The silence that followed was deafening. And found herself holding her breath, her hands gripping the kitchen counter until her knuckles turned white. Something in Emily's tone suggested this conversation would change everything. The test results came back, Emily continued, and Anne could hear her moving closer to where John sat. "Dr. Martinez called me this morning with the final confirmation." John's sharp intake of breath was audible even from the kitchen. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We always do." But what happened next shocked into her core. Instead of tears or fear, she heard something unexpected, relief. "John, I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air like a prayer answered and a nightmare realized simultaneously. And pressed her hand to her mouth, understanding instantly why Emily had been so secretive, why the doctor visits had been shrouded in mystery. She'd been hoping, but also terrified of hoping. "Pregnant?" John's voice cracked completely. "But the doctors said after Emma, with your complications." "I know what they said." Emily's voice was stronger now, filled with a mixture of joy and determination. "But here we are. 12 weeks along, and everything looks perfect. Dr. Martinez says my body has healed beautifully from Emma's delivery." And felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to the couple navigate this monumental news. Here was John, facing unemployment, and Emily, revealing a pregnancy that would bring both immense joy and financial pressure they weren't prepared for. The wind chose that moment to surge with violent intensity, slamming against the apartment with such force that Anne felt the floor vibrate beneath her feet. She moved instinctively toward Emma's room, her protective instincts on high alert. "We can't afford another baby right now," John was saying, his voice thick with emotion. I don't even know if I'll have a job next month." "Then we'll figure it out," Emily replied firmly. "We'll do whatever it takes. And has been such a blessing with Emma, maybe we can work something out." Anne's heart swelled at the mention of her name, at the implicit trust Emily was placing in her. These people weren't just her employers, they'd become her family, and now they were expanding that family under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. She moved closer to Emma's crib, checking on the sleeping baby, when another tremendous gust of wind shook the building. This wasn't just weather anymore, this was nature unleashing its full fury on the city. That's when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The balcony door, which she'd struggled to secure earlier, was straining against its latch. The metal was bending under the pressure, and with each gust, the door moved incrementally. The force of the wind was literally trying to tear the door from its hinges. "John! Emily!" and called out, but her voice was swallowed by the howling wind and the intensity of their conversation in the living room. She watched in horror as the latch began to give way, the screw holding it to the door frame starting to pull loose from the wood. Emma's crib was positioned just 15 feet from that door, and if it burst open... Anne's mind raced as she calculated the physics of the situation. The wind pressure building up outside was creating a vacuum effect inside the apartment. If that door suddenly gave way, everything in its path would be sucked toward the opening with tremendous force. Everything. Including Emma's crib. But the biggest surprise was still coming, and Anne was about to discover just how much courage she possessed when everything she cared about was on the line. The moment arrives like a thunderclap. Just as Anne steps toward the balcony door to check the latch one final time, a massive gust of wind tears through the apartment with unprecedented force. The glass door that she thought she'd secured bursts open with a violent crash, the wind catching it like a sail and slamming it against the wall with such power that the entire frame shudders. In that split second, everything happens at once. The wind rushes in like a living thing, hungry and wild, sweeping across the nursery with devastating force. The baby's crib, positioned near the balcony entrance, rocks violently. Little Emma, startled awake by the chaos, begins to cry as her blanket whips around her tiny form. The crib tilts dangerously, one wheel lifting off the ground as the wind pushes against it with relentless pressure. Anne's heart stops. She watches in horror as the crib slides toward the open balcony door, the wheels scraping against the hardwood floor. The wind is so strong that she can barely keep her footing, but she doesn't hesitate. Every instinct in her body screams one word: run. She lunges forward, her sensible shoes slipping on scattered papers as she fights against the wind that seems determined to push her back. The crib is now halfway to the balcony opening, teetering on the threshold between safety and disaster. Through the chaos, she can see the drop below, 30 stories of empty air ending in unforgiving concrete. "No!" and cries out, her voice lost in the roar of wind, but her determination is absolute. She throws herself forward, her arms outstretched, just as the crib tips past its center of gravity. For one terrifying moment, baby Emma is airborne, her tiny body lifted by the same wind that threatens to carry her over the edge. Time slows to a crawl. Anne's world narrows to this single, crucial moment. She can see Emma's startled face, the way the infant's arms reach out instinctively, the pale pink of her little sleeper against the gray storm sky. And stretches every muscle, extends her reach beyond what seems possible, and by some miracle, or perhaps by the sheer force of her will and love, her hands close around Emma's tiny torso. They crash to the floor together, and cushioning the baby's fall with her own body as they slide several feet across the smooth hardwood. Anne's shoulder hits hard, sending a jolt of pain through her arm, but Emma is safe, crying loudly but unharmed in Anne's protective embrace. Behind them, chaos continues. The door finally slams shut as the wind shifts, but not before papers, toys, and lightweight furniture have been scattered throughout the room. Anne holds Emma close, both of them trembling, as the apartment settles into an eerie quiet broken only by the baby's gradually subsiding sobs. That's when John and Emily burst into the nursery, having heard the crash and Anne's cry from the living room. They take in the scene, the destruction, and on the floor holding their daughter, the obvious signs of what almost happened, and both parents go pale. "Oh my God," Emily whispers, rushing to kneel beside Anne. "Is she hurt? Are you hurt?" And carefully sits up, still cradling Emma, her own hands shaking as the adrenaline begins to fade. "She's okay," Anne says quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "We're both okay." John stares at the balcony door, then at Anne, the full magnitude of what just occurred hitting him like a physical blow. "You saved her," he says, his voice breaking. "You literally caught her as she was." He can't finish the sentence. Emily's eyes fill with tears as she gently takes Emma from Anne's arms, holding her daughter close while helping into her feet. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispers. "I don't know how we can ever thank you enough." As they stand together in the aftermath, something fundamental shifts between them. The barriers of employer and employee, the unspoken distance that had always existed, crumble away completely. In this moment, they're simply three people who love this child, bound together by gratitude, respect, and the shared terror of what might have been. John quietly secures the balcony door properly, installing additional safety locks while Emily tends to both Anne and Emma. Later, Emily shows in the letter from her doctor, the test results show her condition is responding well to treatment, and her prognosis is excellent. John admits his job situation has improved after his promotion came through earlier that day. But more importantly, they both commit to being more present, more aware of the precious life they've been entrusted to protect. In the weeks that follow, Anne finds herself not just an employee, but a cherished part of the family. Her courage in that crucial moment has earned her something money can't buy: unconditional respect and genuine love from the people she serves. Sometimes the most extraordinary heroics happen in ordinary moments, performed by people who never seek recognition for their sacrifices. And Jefferson reminds us that heroes walk among us every day, often invisible until the moment when everything depends on their courage, their quick thinking, and their selfless love. What's a moment when someone's quick action saved the day in your life? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's celebrate the everyday heroes who make all the difference.